Dear Journal, 2 months had passed, and I was still sitting in a prison cell for a crime I didn't even commit. Was I completely insane for waiving my rights for a trial by my peers? I accepted free counsel instead of using the funds my late parents left for us. Man, I don't know what I was thinking. I never thought that things would end up the way it did. I'll begin with the night my parents were killed in a car accident. That was the very night my life changed forever. I was 17 years old. I was up late studying for my history final and waiting for my parents to return home from one of their weekly date nights. They had been married for 20 years and were still so in love. My younger sister Jada was already asleep. I guess she had finished studying for her finals. I realized it was past 1 a.m., which was a lot later than my parents would usually return home. I'll never forget that knock on the door. I knew it wasn't my parents. I mean, why would they be knocking on the door of a home they owned? I was instantly hesitant. The knock sounded different than any other knock I had heard before. Somehow I knew that it would be the knock that changed everything. When I opened the front door, I received the news that my parents were killed by a drunk driver. I immediately went into a state of shock. I remember the flashing lights and looking around at all the nosy neighbors that had come outside. I saw the officer's mouth moving, but after his devastating report, everything else was a blur. I could not bring myself to absorb or comprehend another word. I guess I was entirely in disbelief. I do remember the officer asking, were there any relatives or a family friend I could call to stay with me and my sister? I responded with, yes, we'll be okay. I'll call my aunt. It'll be okay. I think I was trying to convince myself more than the officer. The officer handed me a card. I vaguely remember what it was for. I shut the door after taking the card from the officer. I was supposed to call someone, or be someplace in the morning. I guess it would come back to me by then. The next morning, my sister and I were up bright and early at the medical examiner's office, identifying the bodies of our parents. Jada completely fell apart. The whole process was emotionally draining. My Aunt Stacy did step in as much as she could. I didn't expect her to do as much as she did. She was a single mother raising 3 kids of her own, a 5-year-old daughter and a set of twin boys. They were all under the age of 10 years old. I decided to step up at that point. I had to become the man my sister and I needed to stay together. Besides, I was in my last semester of high school and only a few weeks away from my 18th birthday. Fortunately, my parents had a lot of things already in place. I guess when you're an adult, you learn to prepare yourself for anything. But how could they have been prepared for something like this? They did set aside a nice amount of money for Jada and I for school and life expenses just in case. Being the oldest, I was awarded a monthly stipend effective immediately after they passed for monthly household expenses and to take care of my sister and I daily. We could not gain full access to our individual inheritance until we reached 21 years old or were enrolled in some type of higher learning. Of course, I was only a few weeks away from my high school graduation, and I planned on enrolling in the local community college to complete my basics and then transfer to the university. Jada was a sophomore and just recently turned 16 last month. Our house was already paid for and was going to transfer into my name in a few weeks after I turned 18. So I went into protective mode for my younger sister. I made sure she ate, went to school, and did what she was supposed to, all while maintaining my 3.5 GPA. As the days after our parents' funeral turned into weeks, then months, the dynamic between Jada and me began to change. I didn't know what else to do. The more I tried to give her the stability and structure I figured all teenage girls needed, she seemed to resent me, and our once playful big brother-baby sister relationship began to diminish. I started to see the absence of our parents take a real toll on Jada, and she started to act out because of it. By the time I graduated from high school, I decided to take my basic college course online at the local community college. I went to work full-time and managed to take care of my sister. I figured by the time I was done with my basics, my sister would be done with high school herself. However, while I was juggling work and school, my sister started her junior year of high school on academic probation and 3 months pregnant. We both knew that Mom and Dad would have been beyond disappointed with her. She started to spiral. I think it was partly their death and partly her shame. She seemed to hate me, even though it was hard for both of us. I guess I was thriving a bit more. It's not that I didn't feel the impact of my parents being gone. but I guess I just processed it differently. Or maybe I realized I couldn't bring them back, so I just pushed it aside and focused on what I could do, and tried to be the best I could be. I knew they were still watching over us from heaven, and I wanted to make them proud. Jada started to see me more as a parental figure, and less like her older brother, which you would think would be a good thing, but it wasn't. It damaged our sibling bond in more ways than one. I remember her screaming those famous lines at me more than just a few times. "You're not my father," every time I found myself checking her behind, hanging out with some nothing guy, coming home late, or too hungover to get up for school the next day. She was out of control, and I didn't know what to do. She was right. I wasn't her father, and I was nothing like my dad. I guess the real story began the day Jada came into my room late one night, and the disgust that was usually written across her face when she looked at me wasn't there. It was an emotion that was new, yet familiar. Something had happened, and Jada needed her big brother. I got up quickly from the homework I was working on and said, "What's up, Jada? Are you okay? This better not be about one of those knucklehead punks. Did they touch you?" She started crying, and she ran into my arms, and I could tell it was deeper than just another fight with one of her useless guys of the month. We sat in silence for what seemed like forever. I hadn't held my sister like this since the day we buried our parents. She looked up at me with tears in her eyes and said, "Aunt, I'm pregnant." I can't say I was surprised. With all her late night coming home and hanging out with random dudes, I didn't want to judge her by asking if she knew who the father was. All that would come out soon enough. For now, I just wanted to be her big brother and show her love and support. So I just hugged her and told her to not worry about anything. We were going to get through this together, and I assured her that her baby would be one loved little boy or girl. Always, Anthony.
Dear Diary, I can honestly say that I have become a person that I no longer recognize as myself. When I look in the mirror, I don't see the same Jada as before. The Jada I was before the death of my parents. It was hard to lose both of them at the same time. I went from having two loving parents to them both being gone in a blink of an eye. I was angry, sad, and hurt. I was a 16-year-old ball of emotions, and I didn't know how to process something like that. I was a mess. I wanted the hurt to go away. I would do anything for the pain to subside for just a little while. So you can imagine when skipping school, smoking weed, and hanging out with other lost souls seemed more enjoyable than doing what I should have been doing, knowing I was taught better. My brother Anthony seemed to have it all together, and I envied that. Having my first child at the age of 17 with an abusive boyfriend was not the way I saw my life just a year ago before everything changed. But now was not the time to start feeling bad about the decision I chose to make. Sometimes it's hard to believe the mess I've made of my life. The one person I had left in this world that truly cared about me, I betrayed him. I betrayed him with what seemed like no remorse. I committed the ultimate betrayal. I was selfish. Selfish to think that things would go as planned and nobody would get hurt. It wasn't my intentions for anyone to lose their life. Guilt had been eating away at my soul. What I did to my brother was unforgivable. It was never my intention for him to go to prison for murder. I envisioned Malik getting hurt, but killing my baby's father was never part of my plan. Everything happened so fast. After one of my daily fights with Malik that inevitably left me all battered and bruised, just a quick text to Aunt and my plan was set in motion. Aunt arrived quickly, visibly pissed and wanting answers. I can admit, the tears I shed were a bit extra, due to the fact that I had become so numb to the bruises I received from Malik, which didn't take much. Lately, my breathing too loud was enough to irritate him enough to slap me across my face, black my eye, bloody my nose, and bust my lip. He was mean, but he became downright cruel to me ever since I had baby Bella. He would get drunk and talk to me crazy, and with my smart mouth and his quick temper, I was slapped around a lot. He was twice my size, but that day, I planned to get my lick back. While Aunt and Malik were busy yelling at each other, I ran to the bedroom and got Malik's gun. I aimed it at him. He was so sure that I was bluffing, and because of our daughter, he would never leave a loaded gun around the house. Little did he know how carefully I watched him load his gun every time he would take me to the gun range. I was able to load the gun myself, and my aim had gotten pretty good too. So I was almost certain that a bullet in the shoulder, or maybe even his leg, would do just enough damage to warrant my brother's arrest. Of course I knew Aunt would take the blame for me. I'm his baby sister. And besides, I had Bella, and Bella needed her mother. Everything happened so fast. Malik reaching for the gun caught me completely off guard. I didn't want to lose my open shot opportunity. The adrenaline rush had me second guessing myself. It was now or never. I needed him bleeding for my plan to work. I would use Malik's hospital recovery time to catch ghosts with baby Bella. The reason I needed my brothers arrested was because there was a stipulation in our inheritance that my parents left that stated that I had to be 21 years old or enrolled in some type of higher learning before receiving my portion of the inheritance. The only exception was if my brother Anthony, who received a monthly stipend to take care of us, were to get into trouble with the law, resulting in his incarceration, or become disabled, or God forbid passed away before I turned 21 years of age, I would be able to receive my full inheritance as early as my 18th birthday to help support myself. I needed that money. I dropped out of school after having baby Bella. Her father and I were having so many issues, and I was afraid to tell my brother everything. I was 1 month away from my 18th birthday. This had to work. So when I heard the first gunshot, it was nothing like I had seen on TV. I was horrified by the blood that splattered against the wall. My vision became a bit hazy. I backed up. I knew that I had aimed at Malik's leg, but he was still slowly walking toward me. It was too late to turn back now. I needed a second shot. Perhaps a bullet in the shoulder would slow this bastard down. So I squeezed the trigger again. This time he lunged at me, and instead of his shoulder, my second shot hit him square in the chest, and he went down almost immediately. I dropped the gun instantly. My last night vegetables landed beside his lifeless corpse. I looked for Aunt, who was in the corner holding a crying Bella. Aunt was in utter shock, but he quickly took control of the situation. He went into big brother mode and wiped my fingerprints from the gun as he took the gun into his own hands. What had I done? Malik was supposed to be hurt, riding in an ambulance right now. Instead, he was laying deceased on our living room floor. Aunt was supposed to take the blame for assault with a deadly weapon. Maybe, but not murder. This is not the first time I've told this story. The first time I told this story was about a month after everything had happened. My brother Aunt was serving time for a crime I committed. Malik was 6 feet deep. I could hardly bring myself to attend his funeral. It was extremely hard to live with what I had done, and I had PTSD and severe nightmares. I couldn't eat, I couldn't sleep, and Hennessy became my best friend. The nights I could find a sitter for Bella was too far in between, until my birthday weekend came around and my friend Charlotte offered to babysit baby Bella, while I went down to the local bar to, throw a few back. It was an absolute hole in the wall, where they hardly ever carded anyone. I was on my 5th shot when I met Stacy. Stacy was a cool chick, and judging by the scar on her right cheek, I assumed she had her own set of troubles. We gravitated toward each other and started taking shots together. I had ran out of money, but after a quick chat between Stacy and the bartender, she handed him her card and the shots kept coming. Even though the drink seemed a bit watered down, I was too lit to care. At some point, I started to notice how good Stacy was at holding her liquor. I was completely wasted. We moved to a small table at the back of the bar when my mouth starts moving, and I tell Stacy everything, and I do mean everything. I couldn't stop myself. In between sniffling and crying, I had confessed to this total stranger how I had set my brother up to take the blame for hurting my baby's father, which turned into murdering my baby's father. I told her about my parents' death, the inheritance, the stipulations, everything. She asked questions, listened intensively. At times, she hung on my every word. I figured the shock of the story helped sober Stacy completely up. By the time the bar was closing, I was still hella drunk, and Stacy was calling me an Uber to get home. I'm glad I would never see Stacy again. But I have to admit, it was something so soul-cleansing about confessing everything to this total stranger. She probably just thought the whole situation was just the intoxicated babbles of a messed-up girl. At least that's how I hope she perceived it. Anyway, who cares? I was sure I would never see her again. At least that's what I thought. But I was wrong. Real wrong. I was so quick to go running my mouth to a total stranger. I was trying to ease my guilt and get some things off my chest, admit it out loud and somehow repent of my sins, thinking I would never see this stranger again. Imagine my surprise when I was summoned to court on my brother's case. The case I thought was already done. I was called to the witness stand to be questioned by my brother's court-appointed lawyer, and court set another witness on his appeal. The woman was dressed professionally, her natural hair pulled back away from her face, showcasing the scar on her right cheek. I knew this woman, and she knew me. She knew more about me than she should have, and it was all my fault. It was too late to take it all back, and I had to deal with the consequences of my actions. Always, Jada.
Dear Diary, I've been a paralegal for 3 years now. Right after I graduated from college, I was hired by attorney Eddie Robinson, whom I interned for while I was an undergrad. Never have I ever come across a case where the verdict should have been blatantly incontestable. It was clear from the first meeting that Anthony was innocent. He didn't seem capable of taking a life. The look in his eyes, the way he worded his confession, and his body language made it evident that at best he was a bystander at the scene of the crime. This kid was obviously innocent, but was determined to take the blame for this heinous crime. Why? The question that kept me up at night was, who was he protecting? Then it dawned on me. I did an extensive background check on our client. He was a remarkable kid, graduated at the top of his high school class, now a college kid. Anthony worked hard and was a good employee. All the character witnesses we sought after assured us that this was completely out of character for him. Our client tried to convince us that he had some type of mental break or snapped due to the victim's assault on his sister. But that too was hard to believe. The guy had been through a lot, but was still maintaining. Anyone could see by the way he carried himself that he was mentally strong and stable. He even refused to use some of the money his late parents left for him and his sister to pay for his legal expenses. He wanted to make sure that money went to his sister and her baby. That's when it became perfectly clear just who Anthony was protecting. So, even though we were his court-appointed defense team, Attorney Robinson and I took on Anthony's case pro bono and appealed the case on his behalf. We were determined not to see this innocent young man go to prison for a crime he did not commit. We were not getting the answers we needed from Anthony, so we decided to get the answers we needed directly from the person he was protecting. We knew his sister Jada would never admit the truth or give us any type of information other than the written statement she gave the officers on the night in question. We had to get her to talk one way or another. It was more to this story, and I could feel it in my bones. There was some type of deal made, and I couldn't help but believe that my client was getting the short end of the stick. So me, being the research queen that I am, I found exactly where Anthony's sister Jada was going to be that Friday night, a month after her brother's hearing. Where else? The local bar, trying to drink away her guilt. It was her birthday, and she was getting twisted. It was the perfect opportunity for me to get exactly what I needed. I heard she frequented this hole-in-the-wall establishment and that they hardly carded anyone. We needed to appeal her brother's case, and we needed the evidence to be epic. I wasn't sure of what I was walking into when I entered Woodrow's bar that Friday night, but I was wired and I was ready to play my role. Jada had plenty of alcohol and a guilty conscience, and that was always a great combination for someone like me who needed answers. This was my chance to get close to Jada and get the evidence I needed to help free her brother. Even if Anthony had given up on himself, I hadn't. As I entered the bar and scanned the room for Jada, I saw her already deep in her pity party for one. I had a brief conversation with the bartender, explaining that I needed a couple shots of tequila and then to keep the water shots coming at my signal. I sat close by, waiting for the perfect opportunity. I didn't have to wait very long. Jada was dying for someone to talk to. You could see it written all over her face. She actually spoke to me first as I received my first shot. She asked if I was there to drink away my sorrows as well. Before I could answer, She asked about the scar on my right cheek. She wanted to know if it was a gift from some no-good man. I could tell this woman had a story to tell, so I played along and told her it was, even though the scar was from a hiking accident a few months ago. My scar was the exact end that I needed. Jada began spilling the tea about her seemingly perfect man who became a perfect nightmare after their baby was born. She spoke about his abusive ways and how he had threatened to kill her and their baby if she ever left him. The more drinks she had, the more she talked. She told me about everything, even about the death of their parents, which I already knew due to my own research and interviews with Anthony. I could tell how much she loved and depended on her brother. There was also a sense of envy there as well. She knew he loved her and her child and would do anything for them. And Jada explained exactly how she took advantage of that. She started confessing the plan she made to receive her inheritance earlier than she was supposed to. The wire I wore was coming in quite handy. When her confession was getting to the good part, Jada paused after taking her last sip of Hennessy. She had run out of money. I told her the bartender was a good friend of mine and would put it on my tab as long as we switched to tequila. I needed something clear. Jada agreed and the bartender poured the first shot right in front of us. He then convinced us to move to the table at the back of the bar, where he started to bring us drinks. For Jada, he brought watered-down tequila, and for me, just plain water. Jada was too lit to even notice. After Jada took her next shot on me, the liquid courage she thought she needed to continue worked like a charm. By the end of the night, I had a slight buzz and Jada's entire confession on tape. She seemed relieved to tell someone, to get the whole situation off her chest. She even thanked me for listening to her. She knew she was too tipsy to drive home, but said she would walk and didn't live far. But I called her an Uber instead to make sure she got home safely. I had played my role and kept my composure. I'm sure she believed she would never see me again. Monday morning, I went to my boss, Attorney Robinson, with the tapes and motion to appeal. I even cited where it states that in the United States, a confession is not inadmissible just because the defendant was intoxicated at the time of the confession. Due to the watered-down shots, Jada was not substantially impaired. I even had prepared a written statement from the bartender if needed. The shots she did have did not impair her thinking or interfere with her free will of describing the events in question in great detail. After hearing his sister's confession tape, we were able to appeal Anthony's case with his permission. Jada was summoned back to court on her brother's case. The look on her face when she saw me sitting as a witness in the court was priceless. Jada was charged with the murder of her child's father, Malik Wright. Her brother Anthony received time served and 5 years probation for lying under oath. Anthony received full custody of baby Bella. Jada requested to have her portion of the inheritance used as a monthly stipend to give to her brother to help take care of her daughter Bella. However, Anthony refused the stipend and decided to put it in a trust for baby Bella. This case ended the way it should. As I stated before, the verdict was blatantly incontestable. Anthony was a great kid with a big heart who didn't even have a parking ticket. He needed someone to fight for him, so I did, and I'm glad I did. My commitment to justice paid off tremendously. Always, Stacy.